Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Audit Committee meeting on Wednesday, the 25th of November. I think we're all getting quite used to Zoom and other platform meetings, but just a reminder, if you could keep on mute, please, and just to stop any background noise. If you want to speak, please raise your hand. If I miss you by accident, I should be able to, I can see everyone on my screen, but an officer or somebody else will prompt me. So please just put your hand up. You won't be missed out. Before we start, and I spoke to the business chair, Councillor Flux, before saying this, and he agreed that it would be a good idea. It's no secret that this authority is facing some challenges at the moment. Notwithstanding the pandemic and the economic conditions, but other challenges. And I think there has been some recent meetings when members of the public and those internally have raised some concerns about conduct at certain Northumberland County Council meetings and otherwise. And there is also across local government a concern, and this will be a subject of future reports and discussions, I believe, some concern that Zoom meetings have perhaps led to a decline in councillors' behaviour. So I just think it would be a good idea, as a general reminder to all of us, to pay respect to each other and officers in the conduct of meetings and otherwise. This is not directed at anyone in this meeting. I just spoke to Councillor Flux and thought that anyone chairing a meeting who would like to, it would be a good idea to remind everyone of the need to show that respect. Robust discussion and passion, absolutely, but I think there's a fine line, and I think it's quite obvious when that's been crossed. Councillor Flux, was there anything you wanted to add? Are you happy with that?
I'm reasonably happy with that, Chair. I think that it's very important that members show everyone respect and everyone on meetings realise there are limitations to this technology, and everyone to have patience, kindness, respect and general adherence to all rules of the council and rules of our behaviour. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Flux. So we move to apologies for absence. Kay will read out apologies for absence and also just go through the list, and if everyone can say if they're present or not.
Okay, Councillor Castle, I have apologies. Councillor Grimshaw?
Present.
Councillor Hill?
Present.
Councillor Purvis?
Present.
Councillor Rickaby?
Present.
Councillor Swinburne?
Present.
Councillor Swithenbank? No. Councillor Towns?
Present.
Independent members, Peter Topping? Could you unmute Peter, please? And Stephen Watson?
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kay. Second item is the minutes of the meeting that we held on the 30th of September as circulated, to be confirmed as a true record. Can I ask everyone just to cast their eyes? Is there anything that they noted on the minutes that they wanted to raise? Otherwise, can I just see a show of hands that everyone's happy that that's a true record? Thank you. Item 3, the disclosure of members' interests. It's at this part where members declare if they have anything of a personal or particularly of a disclosable pecuniary nature. Does anyone have any interest to declare? I don't see anyone. Thank you. Item 4, the reports of Mazars, who are our external auditors. We have a verbal update on the audit progress of the Council Statement of Accounts 2019-20. And over to Cameron Waddle.
Thanks, Chair. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Excellent. So in terms of the two things that we do in terms of the County Council, we audit the Council's accounts and the group accounts, and we also audit the pension fund. In terms of the County Council accounts, the best summary really is the audit of that is ongoing as it stands at the moment. So the team are actually continuing working in that area, recognising there's a number of things we do need to consider in the context of this year's value for money conclusion. But there's very little I can do beyond say that at this stage, Chair. In terms of the pension fund, however, you may recall back in the summer, we said that we would do our utmost to get the pension fund audit as complete as possible, so that we were in a position to issue letters to the auditors of other entities in Northumberland where they were proposing to sign off before that. So I understand, Chair, that the audit completion report was circulated to members of the committee on Thursday.
Yeah.
So I'm more than happy to take the committee through that. But you'll notice on page, I think, 2 of the report, there is a status of audit work. And I think possibly more importantly, just to give the committee an update on exactly where each of those areas is as it stands at the moment. That aside, Chair, importantly, because we understand there is obviously reputational issues at stake, we have issued a letter summarising the results of the audit to the auditor of the Northumbria National Parks Authority to allow them to be in a position to sign off that audit. So we've done that to make sure that's not delayed, and that's reasonable in the unlikely to be signed off until the new year with the move to 31st March deadlines for those entities. So it's not a great rush, if that makes sense. So with that, Chair, shall I quickly go through, well, it don't necessarily have to be quickly, but shall I go through the main issues in the audit completion report?
Yes, please.
So in terms of the work, we are broadly complete. We have taken advice from the National Audit Office to make sure we're consistent in terms of the way we approach that. And while we've been told we can't sign the audit off until the main county council audit's finished, we can complete all the work, so that we just need to do some topping and tailing at the end. And that is broadly where we are at the moment. So in terms of the opinion on the accounts themselves, we do anticipate issuing an unqualified opinion, which is obviously good. In the context of the uncertainty around about the financial markets end of March, we have had to do a reasonably large extra amount of work to get the assurance we need because of that uncertainty, notably where you've got things aren't quoted on a listed exchange. And most pension funds have that. That's not any different for Northumberland compared to any other pension fund that Mazars audits anywhere else in the country. We have included a draft report. What that does include, though, is an emphasis of matter paragraph. I'm still not very good at saying that with my teeth in. So an emphasis of matter paragraph is one where, as the auditor, we feel that we have got sufficient assurance to issue an unqualified opinion, but we feel that there is something within the accounts themselves that is so important to a reader that may use them that we should sort of raise that in our report. And the key thing for your pension fund is the merger with Town and Wear from 1st April. So having taken advice, we feel that an emphasis of matter, just highlighting that fact within the pension fund accounts, is important for a reader of the accounts. What we don't have in yours is the material valuation uncertainty in relation to investments, which we have at many other funds, and that is to do with the nature of the portfolio of investments that effectively Northumberland County Council's had. So we've managed to get that assurance. The pension fund hasn't declared that valuation uncertainty, and therefore we don't think it's appropriate to include an emphasis of matter in relation to that issue. So broadly speaking, everything is done and dusted, with a little bit of tweaking still to do. I had a chat with Chris Hand earlier this morning about the consistency reports, around whether or not we can issue the audit report in the pension fund's annual report, which is separate. And we've been told that because the wording of the consistency report says the audited accounts of the pension fund, we can't. So we think you need to basically publish the annual report itself by the deadline, just noting that fact. And once again, when we finish the pension fund audit completely and issue the report, we'll issue the consistency report at exactly the same time. You'll notice on the same page, we touch on wider powers. Those are where a member of the public, elector, representative and elector, sometimes the press, may wish to inspect the accounts and may wish to ask questions of the council or the auditor, or indeed make an objection. We have had no such matters during the 1920 audit, which is a good thing, because these things can often be very complex and take some considerable time to resolve. On the next page is the status of our work, and you'll see there's quite a few ambers and a couple of reds in there. So our proposed, Chair, is to give a quick verbal update in terms of where each of those sit as it stands, and we'll follow that up in writing with a letter, so the committee and officers are absolutely clear exactly where things are at as it stands today. So on transfers in, that work is now complete. Nothing significant to report. On contributions receivable, that work is now signed off with nothing significant to report. The computations and lump sums is now signed off with nothing significant to report. This is going to sound like a broken record very soon. Benefits payable, that work is complete with nothing significant to report. On transfers out, we still have a sample of 2 to test, though we understand, sorry, I understand that we got that information from Andrew yesterday, so we anticipate completing that work shortly. Work of an expert is very important because of the reliance on experts in preparing the accounts and in doing our work. And we have asked for a little bit more information around about that area, which we understand should be forthcoming shortly, but not in itself something to hold up issuing the letter to EY, which is what we've done. And disclosure, we still need to just do a quick run through of the revised set of accounts we've had from Andrew, just to make sure they're entirely consistent with our expectations. And that leads us to audit closure procedures. Clearly, that is something we do at the very end of the process, so we're not in a position to complete that as it stands at the moment. So you'll see, compared to the audit completion report you got on Thursday, there's been quite a lot of progress in practical terms and a lot more in terms of no issues to report. In terms of findings, you'll see in terms of the main risks, which are around about management override of control and the valuation of unquoted investments. In both areas, essentially, we're saying that we've got the assurance we need and there's nothing significant to bring to your attention. Beyond that, there have been some discussions around about internal control deficiency. We have made one because we need to, where we identify something, but to an extent, it's a little bit of a moot point given the transfer to Town Aware Pension Fund at the year end. And in terms of misstatements, you'll see that there are a number of misstatements where we have these, apart from reporting those to you, where we need that in a representation letter back from officers. We don't need that letter yet. We need it when we're about to sign off. And what we have done is we've reported unadjusted misstatements to the auditor of Northumberland National Park Authority, so that they consider that in the round when coming to their conclusion for that entity. But if you think about what Northumberland National Park Authority's share of the errors would be, given its size relative to the county council, then we think it's incredibly unlikely that would cause any material issues. But that's a judgment for EY as that auditor. Beyond that, a number of changes to disclosure amendments. The management letter, representation letter, is broadly standard, with specific around about unquoted investments, as I think you'd probably expect given the judgment involved there. And the audit report is fairly, I'm going to say dull because it's completely unqualified, but you'll see on page 16 of the report the wording of the emphasis matter that refers to the merger. And again, that merely is pointing out what's already disclosed in the pension fund accounts. So I'll stop now unless Daniel, the audit manager who's on the call, has got anything to add, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Cameron. Daniel?
No, I don't think I have anything to add. I think that's a pretty accurate summary of where we're at the minute.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? No questions on that? Cameron, could you just clarify the timescales again on this, on both the, I think you referenced that we'll get a letter ahead of the report.
So we will issue a follow-up letter after we've finished all the work on the pension fund, so the committee can see what I've just told you verbally, and we'll also reference the work that's still outstanding on transfers out and the expert that we're waiting on. So when that's complete, that will come to you for consideration. The sign-off will happen at the same time as the County Council sign-off for the pension fund. In terms of the County Council, the work is ongoing on both the accounts and VFM. Trying to come up with a timetable on that would be difficult. We do know, and I mentioned to Chris earlier, that Northumberland is going to be in a very, very long list of authorities where the audit is completed after the end of November for various different reasons across the country.
Okay. That's fine. That item was to receive verbal updates. We don't have to vote on any decision, but is there any questions or points anyone wants to raise at all? Chris, Nick, do you want to come in at all? Anyone? No?
Nothing from me, Chair.
Thank you. Okay. We move to item 5, which is the reports of the Executive Director of Finance and Section 151 Officer, which is the pension fund accounts 2019-20, which is Appendix A, and then the Treasury Management Review, which is Appendix B. Chris, are you coming in for this?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Good morning. So the first item, the pension fund accounts, obviously follows on from Cameron's update there. So this report accompanies the pension fund annual report and accounts for last year, 1920, which were circulated to members electronically and also posted out. So you've got the sort of latest version. The pension annual report is a standalone document. So the pension fund accounts are reported as part of the council's main accounts, but also under the local pension scheme regulations, there's a requirement to publish a separate annual report that just covers the pension fund before the 1st of December. And obviously those two documents need to be consistent, which is one of the checks that external audits carry out, and Cameron's just given us an update on that. So whilst he's not in a position to sign the consistency, I think it's clear that he's confident that that is the case. So we need to ask audit committee's approval to publish this version of the accounts on the website to meet that requirement for the pension scheme. The report sets out on table on pages 3 and 4 all the various different statements that are contained in the pension fund reports and accounts, explaining each one's purpose. The report also highlights the sort of key messages in the statements, which are: there's been an increase in the number of active members from 9,248 to 9,326 during the year, and also an increase in the number of pensioner members from 8,806 to 9,198 during the year, and that's shown on page 59 of the accounts, and there's more detail in the appendix in page 92. It also highlights the overall financial position of the fund, which is shown on pages 71 and 72 of the accounts, and this shows that the market value of the fund was 1.4 billion at the end of the year, and that's a 7.5% reduction, which very much reflects the picture that's experienced nationally in the current economic climate. And the other thing to highlight, which Cameron has done, is that obviously the pension fund transferred to Tyne and Wear on the 1st of April, and so Northumberland's last day's reporting entity was the 31st of March 2020. So I'm just happy to take any questions from members, but also just like to thank Andrew Lister from the Pension Service for all his hard work on the accounts and just being available today to assist with any questions that members may have.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Andrew. Does anyone have any questions on this? Okay. Can I ask in terms of, I don't know if there's anyone in this committee that sits on the pension fund committee, just to the structure of the Tyne and Wear pension fund, it's led by South Tyneside Council, is that right?
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, does anyone have any points or questions at all? Mark?
Chair, will we take an Appendix A and B together there, the Treasury Management Mid-Year Review?
Oh no, we're taking A first.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So nobody has any questions of A. Okay, so can I ask if everyone is happy that this is the version that is published and happy to approve this? Can you see show of hands? That's great. Thank you very much. And we move to item B, which is the Treasury Management Mid-Year Review, which is your Appendix B. Is this Chris again?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll just do a quick intro, and then I'll ask Andy Stewart to take us through the detail. So this is one of 2 regular reports to Audit Committee on Treasury management activities. So this is the mid-year review, so it gives us the position up to the end of September. It obviously provides a review of our borrowing activity, our investment activity, and an overview of the economic conditions that prevailed during those 6 months. It gives us the performance against our strategy, treasury management strategy statement, and also our prudential indicators. And obviously, one of the key things is just to confirm that all those parameters and limits were adhered to during that period. So if I can, I'll just invite Andy to take us through in a little bit more detail.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Chair. Yeah, just moving on to draw committee's attention to borrowing, which is covered on page 9. It's just to highlight that interest rates have actually fallen and they're forecast to actually remain low for a prolonged period. The shorter term borrowing rates are particularly attractive at present, and they are highlighted in the graph on page 6. So with this in mind, we as a team are continuing to look for opportunities to fulfill our 2021 borrowing requirement, which is £115 million this year, with shorter term deals. And at the date the report was written, we'd actually already secured 9 forward borrowing deals worth £75 million with other local authorities. And these deals had an average term of 1.37 years. So focusing on that short-term borrowing that I just mentioned. In terms of our total external borrowing, this has decreased over the period by 37.3 million. And the figure that we're at the 30th of September was 787.7 million. And this is basically as a result of maturing loans. But just to flag that this figure is forecast to increase around about 845.4 million by the end of the year. And this is basically to fund our capital programme. I think it's also worth highlighting in terms of the borrowing, it's expected that interest rates payable on the interest earned on, the interest payable on borrowing is forecast to be 2.6 million lower than the actual budget that we have for this year. And this is due to lower than expected interest rates. And this is due to the market conditions, but also our emphasis on shorter term borrowing, which is cheaper, and also there's a reduced need to borrow as well. So just moving on to investment activity, which is covered in the report on pages 9 to 11. Page 10 highlights that the balance has reduced from 191 million to 176 million over the period. And this is projected to reduce further down to 100 million by the end of the year as capital spend is actually incurred. Also on page 10, over the 6 months period, the overall rate of return that we've managed to achieve in our investments is at 0.85%. Investment returns aren't great at present, but ours is slightly higher, and this is as a result of previous decisions. I think I've mentioned to committee members before that we managed to secure some deals with other local authorities which attracted a higher rate of interest, so it's pushing our average rate up. Also on page 10, it's worth highlighting that our return on investments, the budget is 1.4 million, and that we're forecasting to be round about that figure by the financial year end. I think, as mentioned, the rates that we're actually achieving is lower, but in terms of investment balances have actually been higher, which is offsetting the lower rates that we're currently being paid. And I think just one final point to finish off, Chair, it's just to highlight a point that Chris made, that we've actually operated within all of our prudential limits, and these are set out on pages 11 to 14. And these basically ensure that our capital plans are prudent, affordable and sustainable. Thank you, Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions that committee members may have.
That's great. Thank you very much, Andy. Does anyone have any questions on this? Mark? Mark Swinburne?
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of points if I could raise. Firstly, it's with regards to loans to investments, loans to other local authorities, and this is something that has recently come up on North of Tyne. I understand it's standard practice to lend money to other local authorities. We potentially make a profit on there. And up until March of this year, it was classed as a low risk. And that's been documented in other information that I've seen. However, that's not necessarily the case now. And if I can quote Croydon as one local authority who's recently declared as themselves as going bust, many local authorities have now stated that they're in financial difficulties. If we're lending to other local authorities with the potential of gaining a positive return, I'm going to question if we should now recognise that as a risk. We may have good intentions of lending that money out with hopes of a positive return. We have no idea what state that local authority is going to be in a few months' time. So they may look okay now. What I'm going to say is, I'm not going to say that we shouldn't lend that money out and look for a positive return, but I would ask that we now look at that as something which should be considered also as a risk, given the current climate. But I'm open for feedback on that. That was my first point. Secondly, on page 11 under 7.1 capital expenditure table that you've got there, when we look at the current budget and the forecasted outturn, the majority, or should I say all bar one, seem to show a lower forecasted outturn, except for human resources, which has shown a forecasted outturn against budget of 4 million increase on the budget. And I was just wondering why that would be when all the rest are shown as under budget.
Thanks, Mark. Andy?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, taking point one from Councillor Swinburne about the local authority risk. I think it is fair to say that risk has increased in terms of placing investments with local authorities, and officers within the team will continue to monitor that position. So I think it is right to recognise that risk. But I also think there's an element of if the government would actually allow a local authority to go bust, so would not be able to honour those commitments. So I think that would sort of offset the risk associated with placing those investments with other local authorities. But I think it is something that we could pick up with our Treasury advisors with Link Asset Services, and we could discuss that, and as Councillor Swinburne suggests, we could recognise that as a risk going forward.
Thank you.
In terms of point two, I'm sorry, I don't have the detail in terms of our existing capital programme in front of us, which forecasts the outturn position. So I don't know exactly which schemes or scheme that would relate to, but that's something I could have a look into and come back with the detail behind that.
If you could please, I'd be grateful. Thank you.
No problem.
Do I see any? Yeah, Stephen?
Yeah, I'm actually just picking up on a point that Councillor Swinburne made, to be quite honest. I did a quick search through the document on the word risk, and the word risk appears 7 times, but I don't actually get much of a flavour from the document as to what the actual risk of any activity is. We can see movement of money, we can see investment, we can see borrowing, etc., but I can't see any kind of flavour of where the risk is attached to any of this stuff. Now, obviously, the document does refer to everything being covered by normal risk management practices, etc., and risk assessments, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of clarity in there about which individual activity has a certain degree of risk and which doesn't. And I think Councillor Swinburne made a good point about the risk landscape is shifting quite radically at the minute. Is it possible to actually get some sort of flavour of where the risks are attached to all these particular activities?
Could I perhaps come in there, Chair? Thank you. So yeah, they're great points. I mean, obviously, this is unprecedented circumstances we're operating in, so we do need to reflect on that comment and perhaps look at our risk register. And as Andy says, we'll pick up with our Treasury management advisors. But I suppose we just have to recognise that any investment comes with a risk, and that's part of the Treasury Management function's role, just to balance that risk and not to put all our eggs in one basket. So there is a Treasury Management strategy that's approved as part of the budget setting process that outlines our approach to investments for the year. So investments are very much done on a risk-based and counterparty list, so approved in advance. So we need to reflect on those comments when we're coming up with the Treasury Management strategy for next year. But that's part of the Treasury Management function, is just to recognise that risk and manage it and appropriately. But what we can do, I think I'll be guided by Andy, is we could probably produce a report that outlines a bit more detail where our investments are by those sort of counterparty risk ratings.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, we could do that, Chris. That would be possible.
Okay, thank you.
Is that okay, Stephen?
Yeah, that would be very good. Thank you very much.
Peter?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, not to sort of prolong this unnecessarily, but I mean, one of the points about a risk strategy is its ability to identify and respond to new and emerging risks. And I think what in the response you've just given, you've identified that there is a change in the risk situation, particularly with regard to other local authorities. And I think the point is that the sort of strategy can't be sort of static from one year to another. I mean, if there are increasing risks to do with other local authorities, some of your mitigation may be, quite frankly, how to take action if one of the local authorities that we have done this deal with is flagging up as being financially vulnerable. I mean, I'm assuming we haven't laid any money against Croydon, but Northamptonshire, there are other local authorities in this position. So you've got to be dynamic in terms of managing this risk. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Peter.
And again, just coming there, I think it's probably fair that we do deal with each individual Treasury Management transaction on its own merits at that time. So there's appropriate processes and due diligence happens before any commitments made, and obviously we do review the portfolio through that sort of lens. But possibly, as we touched on, we'll come back with an update on just what our spread of current risk in the investment portfolio, so members can better understand that, and perhaps reiterate some of the process we have in place that gives that sort of assurance.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay, Andy?
Chair, just picking up on Chris's point there, just to assure committee members that in terms of the investments that we place, we get regular updates through the market and also through Link Asset Services, and the team are actually monitoring those on a daily basis. But we will pick up the previous point about other local authorities as well.
Thank you. David?
Thank you, Chair. Talk of Croydon Council leads me to a point, but I would just say one of the reasons that I read why Croydon found themselves in the position they're in were decisions made some years ago for the council to invest heavily in shopping centres and retail, which, notwithstanding COVID, any idiot a few years ago could have seen that the world was changing and that online shopping was becoming a much bigger thing, and that process has just been accelerated by COVID. And it obviously there's a ring of familiarity to that, to do with previously Arch and now Advance, and ownership of retail outlets and shopping centres. But that leads me on to the point, which is a lot of our risk, a lot of our loans to outside bodies are currently to Advance, so they're kind of not particularly covered in this report. Now, with our new remit going forward, this committee is going to be looking at more able to look at what things happening at Arch, and I wonder if we can get similar reports. I mean, will we get similar reports, or can we get similar reports when we pick that function up? Because I think we're talking about risk to the council and risk to lending money to other local authorities. But as I see it, we've also got significant tens, if not hundreds of millions of pounds worth of exposure to our own development company. So surely we need to be getting a report on that now that our remit has been extended. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, David. Yeah, that's certainly the point you made. It's definitely not a case of one of those, what was Boris's saying about Captain Hindsight. You didn't need any hindsight at the time to think why who on earth thought it was a good investment to buy shopping centre. Chris, did you want to come in on that? And then Nick? Nick, do you want to come in? Oh, sorry. There's a slight delay.
Let you go first.
Okay, yeah, no, thank you. It's a good point, David, and I think the obviously the whole sort of retail scene is very uncertain at the moment, but we have an advance shareholder group that meets monthly, and that includes council senior officers and members, and we do receive financial reports from Advance, and they are being scrutinised probably at a level higher than has ever been done before because of the situation we find ourselves in. I can't pretend that everything is rosy. I mean, you know, there are big retailers going bust, and I think we need to just keep a very close eye on it. And Chris and his team are working with the finance team within Advance to get sort of a clearer picture of how things may pan out. They're doing a lot of different scenario planning. They're providing forecasts with kind of best case, worst case, and medium case, and we're keeping a very, very close eye on all of the finances, so within the sort of group boundary. And but it is an important point. We can't undo what happened, previously. But we just need to make sure we manage it as best we can, and that the directors of Advance do that as well. And they are, they're working very hard on that. I can see that, and we're monitoring it literally every month, and getting reports on age debt analysis and so on right across their portfolio, whether it be retail investments or housing or whatever. So it is being looked at in detail constantly.
Thanks, Nick. Chris, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I think probably just to add another facet to it is my understanding of those councils that have got themselves into trouble is where they've become reliant on that sort of commercial income stream to support their day-to-day services, and when the commercial investments have gone wrong, that's where they're getting into trouble. We as a council are not in that position. It's important we maintain that. Our investments are largely for kind of regeneration and policy reasons, not for a commercial return from our subsidiary that would support our core services.
Okay, see Dolgett.
Thank you, Chair. Just on from Nick and Chris there, I think as shareholder representative, I have expressed some fairly serious concerns about some of the issues relating to Advance currently. I have put onto the work programme a report which is likely to come in February about a number of those issues. So it was just to give the group assurance that we are looking at these issues and will be reporting on them.
That's great, thank you.
Sorry, I should just say that's not actually just about retail. I think it's a much wider issue around the loans, etc. So just for clarity.
That's great, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Purvis?
Just quickly, I mean, I was part of the administration when the shopping centre, and just to say I take great offence at being called an idiot or said that only an idiot would do something like that. By no means am I an idiot, Councillor Towns. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I don't think David was referring, I think he was referring to the general decision rather than naming anyone.
Well, I was part of the decision, wasn't I? So, to be fair.
Okay. maybe unwise in your opinion, as opposed to idiots would have been a better word.
It's a better word, isn't it? It's a better word.
Yeah. Okay. That's fine. Does anyone
Chair, in the spirit of your announcement at the beginning of the meeting, I apologise for using the term any idiot. It was not aimed at any particular individual, and I will replace that word with I feel it was highly unwise. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Lynn? You're on mute, Lynn.
You're on mute, Lynn.
Lynn, we can't hear you.
I also thank David for being a gentleman and taking that back, because I too, like my colleague, was a part of that administration, and we at the time thought it was very good investments, as did the current administration when they decided to change it from art to advance, and it's gone downhill since then. So, I mean, pot, kettle black. But thank you, David, for rebuking that, because we aren't all idiots. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Lynn. I think the wider point is, of course, always looking at the whole risk framework, which is the job of the Audit Committee. And I mean, I've been a councillor since some shape or form for about 12, 13 years. And there has been times I like to think I'm quite on the ball, I'd like to think, but there has been decisions I've been part of where I've regret and think should have maybe looked at that, scrutinised more. Sometimes, particularly in the town and parish council sector, you can have the blink and you miss it decision making. So I think the wider point was around the whole risk framework rather than calling each other idiots. But appreciate what David said and the points that have been made. Does anyone else have any comments on the Treasury Management Mid-Year Review? No? So we've been asked to receive this report, which we've done. We've had a very good discussion on that, and we are to agree to present this report to the County Council for information. Just a show of hands, is everyone content with that way forward? Thank you very much. Item 6 is the report of the Executive Director of Adults and Children's Services. This is the review of external inspection reports. Adults and Children's Services, Appendix C. Obviously, inspections must be one of the areas that has faced challenges with the pandemic. Now, who's presenting this?
It's me, Chair, Alan Hartwell.
Oh, hi. Hi, Alan. Thanks very much. If you'd like to present the report.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Yes, as the Chair says, the pandemic has presented some challenges towards inspection, and the report details that. It is the 6-monthly report on external inspections in adults and children's services that the members of this committee are used to. But the report does differ from previous ones because there have not been any formal inspections since the first COVID-19 restrictions were implemented in March. However, the purpose of the report is to provide members of this committee with assurance that scrutiny does continue both internal and externally. The regulators, the CQC and Ofsted have been active within Northumberland. The report describes that activity in relation to adult care settings, where members will note that there have been support calls to establishments and no concerns have been raised. Children's residential homes, where improvements have been cited, as well as visits to schools. I think there's been around 13 visits at the last count up to the current date. They started in September, and there has also been quarterly monitoring of our special educational needs and disabilities action plan and the action plan for the joint target area for inspection as well in relation to child exploitation. And the report just details, largely for information, the findings that have come from looking at those things. The inspections have started again by the CQC within adult services, and across the country. Ofsted have initiated a series of what they call focused visits within local authorities, but they've been put on pause with the latest COVID-19 restrictions. And I'm happy to take any questions on the report, Chair.
Thank you. So I presume it's obviously not an area where, I mean, technology, obviously, like what we're doing, can have meetings. Inspections don't really lend themselves to any kind of technology help, really. I mean, you kind of physically need to be there. Is that correct? There hasn't been any attempt to use any online tool to help?
Across the country, there has been online has been used. So when within Northumberland, when we've had our quarterly scrutiny with the Department for Education and NHS England around our special educational needs and disabilities written statement of action, that's all been done virtually in a meeting such as this, and that's been an effective way of doing it. But that isn't actually an inspection. Certainly for the school visits, those have been physical visits in person. Likewise, when inspectors recently came to Carlo House as well. So by and large, yes, it is a real challenge to do those kind of assessments virtually, but the regulators, where they can, have tried to use virtual methods.
Great. Thank you. Lynn, did I see your hand up?
Yes, thank you. It was just with the send. I just wonder if there is enough virtual equipment for these children to be able to access. I mean, I know we've got problems with schools, especially in our area in southeast of Northumberland, where they're more impoverished. And I'm just wondering if we're finding out how many iPads or tablets, etc., that's actually out there for children, if they indeed can't go to school for whatever their disabilities or because they need to be extra protected. Have they actually got the equipment that they need, or is that an ongoing concern, Alan? But I also commend the work that you're doing, because I know it's been under such challenging times and circumstances. But it does worry me a little bit about the younger children at home schooling, and if they've got the proper equipment to bring them up to standards, because they've been behind for so long. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Lynn. Alan?
Yes, and work has been ongoing really since the start of the pandemic, when that very issue was raised, and there's been a coordinated piece of work from Children's Services with schools to try to ensure that such equipment does get out to those children and families where it is needed. And that is an ongoing task. But the answer is yes, that has been done and is continuing.
Great. And Leslie, and then Nick.
Yes, excuse me. Thanks, Chair. Yes, Alan, it's heartening to have this report. We are in difficult times, and to know that we are, although we can't do physical inspections, and I obviously in a past life know how important any inspection is. But my concern is, can you assure me and assure the committee of, should anything arise, virtually or otherwise, what measures have we got to protect the council to ensure that any problem is dealt with quickly and efficiently?
Certainly, the systems and the structures that are in place, such as things like whistleblowing, there are still the avenues. All of the avenues around complaints are still open, and they're still active. And they are, and all of the structures that were in place prior to the pandemic are still in place in terms of ensuring that there's a place for those to go to, and ensuring that they are allocated and responding to as well. So, for example, the senior management teams still meet actually on a more regular basis, and where those things can be brought to. And monitored and ensured that they are that the satisfactory conclusion is reached.
Thank you,
Nick.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I had to go and answer the door, but I think I picked up that Lynn had raised something about the devices that are being distributed. Just to say that I had a discussion yesterday about looking into how well they're being used, because there's another 300 on their way, and obviously if we're getting them out into the community and to those people that most need them, we also want to make sure that they are well used and that people have the sort of training and so on. So I've asked for that to be looked at just yesterday afternoon, and I'll sort of keep you informed of that, Lynn.
Stephen?
Just a quick one for Alan. I noticed that you said that you're keeping all the control mechanisms in the structures that you already have in place in your control structures going, which is great. But obviously, in a changed environment like we have at the present time, the emphasis on some controls it shifts a little bit. And I'm particularly thinking of whistleblowing here. Are we confident that everybody understands the process of whistleblowing and the need for whistleblowing and the ability to do it? Because we're in such a changed environment here that the normal framework of control has shifted quite radically. So that might mean that some controls are far more important than they were, say, 12 months ago.
It's certainly the case that whistleblowing is something that has been a prominent within discussions at senior management meetings, and it actually has been a technique that has been used. And I think the report makes reference to it with regards to one of our settings. So whereas I couldn't speak on behalf of all of my colleagues in terms of providing assurance that in terms of that, certainly the senior managers are very aware of the role that whistleblowing plays. It's been active, and it's been present within discussions within senior management circles. So I would take confidence from that that they are aware, and they would be sharing that with their staff.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else have anything else? We've been recommended to note the findings, and what we've just done, assess the effectiveness of these scrutiny arrangements. This is, of course, a department and area. Obviously, like anywhere, there's always some problems that crop up, but it's always performed pretty strongly. Does anyone have any other points or questions on that? Are we happy to thank Alan and his team very much and to note the findings? Okay, just happy with that. Just show of hands. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Chair.
Now we move to the report of the Chief Internal Auditor. Key outcomes from internal audit reports issued 2nd of July 2020 to 6th of November 2020, which is our Appendix D and Appendix 1. Is that Kevin and Alison?
Yeah, yes, Chair, it's me. If you can hear me okay?
Can hear you, Kevin, yeah.
Yep, great, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Chair, this is a regular report which audit committee members will be familiar with, where we provide a regular update on the conclusion of some of the internal audit work on a periodic basis. The report before committee today outlines the outcomes from 6 issued internal audit reports, as well as a briefing note which we prepared following the closure of a school within the county. I would draw members' attention to the table which starts on page 5 of the appendix, where we just have on each side of the table just a one-side summary of what the audit was intended to achieve, what the objectives were, and the outcomes from that audit, as well as what progress has been made since the audit was undertaken. Committee members will be aware that we also undertake evidence checking where recommendations are stated as implemented. We undertake some checks to make sure that that is the case. We've performed that evidence checking again. As we reported to committee in July, we hadn't been able to perform that evidence checking due to the pandemic arrangements. So what we've done is gone back to all of the reports which were included in the report to audit committee in July and performed appropriate evidence checking against all of those reports as well, just to give committees assurance that we haven't missed anything just because of the lockdown arrangements. We've gone back and done those checks subsequently, and the details are provided in the report, Chair. one final comment, Chair, on page 13, just reflecting obviously the changed arrangements because of the pandemic, which we find ourselves in. We've just provided a short summary on some of the additional work that we've been undertaking as a team during the period, as that work wouldn't necessarily result in a formally issued report. So again, it's just to give committee an idea or a flavour of some of the outcomes of some of the additional work we've been performing, Chair. I wouldn't propose to go through it in any more detail, Chair, but happy to take any questions.
That's great. I mean, I know it certainly was on that challenge with the government urging NCC to pay out the grants as quickly as possible, and sometimes you hadn't received the money, let alone been able to do the risk check. So that was obviously a big challenge for the team. Does anyone, Councillor Swinburne?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, you can identify, as many of the council staff have, an increased and varied workload that's been covered quite recently here by the team. But there's a couple of points I would just like to pick out on here. And the first one is on page 8 with regard to the report that's in front of us here. I have a few concerns over the items that have been picked out with regards to this, and it's under the main issues identified. So we have a significant number of purchase orders being raised retrospectively. That's quite a concern to me. Members of the Audit Committee will remember a report that came to us where this was highlighted in some rather questionable activity, where purchase orders had been raised after payments had been made on a previous report. And I really hope that that isn't the case here. And I question why purchase orders are being raised retrospectively and not in the correct process. The next point is where service areas not meeting the invoice payment target date set out by the authority. The knock-on effect to suppliers on that can be quite significant. The current situation that we've got in the pandemic could literally be the difference between one of our suppliers going bust. So I really think we need to pull our socks up and making sure that we're hitting these target dates for paying these bills. And the next one, and I know Chair will be familiar with this, a robust process for the approval of purchase card expenditure. There's recent things gone on within another authority with regards to purchase card expenditure, and that draws another concern to me. So that's with regards to the items on that page. And another brief one on page 9, and it's not specifically about this, but it says about the Section 106 officer role representing a single point of failure. I know we've raised in this committee about a single point of failure in a particular role. What I wanted to specifically pull out on this is with regards to, it's slightly moving away from that, but in a similar vein. It's when you're trying to contact an individual within the authority, and the fact that when they're off, that's it. You know that's where the work ends, and you can't progress anything. I've raised this previously about the difficulty of people not having deputies and having access to their mailbox. And this is where there's always seems to be a struggle within the authority. There is an easy process where people can have access, delegated access to people's mailbox. So if they're off on leave or if they're suddenly off on sick, the work doesn't stop there. If we have someone on prolonged absence for sickness, for example, for a number of months, the council can't come to a halt, and that person cannot be the single point of failure. So whether we really start to move, and I know highways are doing this, whether we really start to move to shared mailboxes or to the delegate process where people have access to other people's inboxes, and that doesn't create any breach with personal or confidential mail if it's marked accordingly. I think it does highlight in here that some things need to change, and people need to work more efficiently. So those are the 2 points that I wanted to bring out from that. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Mark. If anyone's curious what the reference was, there's a local authority who issued a credit card to a councillor who used it for 10 years, and they've for personal expenses. There's no record of any decision to allow use of a credit card, let alone a credit card policy. And it's been going on. I believe there's about £200,000 been spent over 10 years. So when you hear about things like that, you think, wow, less the whole of local government. Elgit?
Yeah, just in terms of the first comments there Councillor Swinburne made, I totally agree in terms of particularly around procurement, purchase orders, contractual arrangements. And as an executive team, what we have done is and started to ensure now over, well, pre-COVID, probably over the last year or so, probably 2 years, actually, time just flies, where some of the exception reporting now comes directly to the executive team around audits. Previously, we would rely on, so for example, when I was an executive director, each directorate's areas of internal audit and actions would come to that directorate. But one of the things I think we've recognised in recent years that there are some cross-cutting corporate areas that we could do much better on. And I totally agree, irrespective of COVID, you know, late payment to suppliers, ensuring the right purchase orders are created. It's these small things that ensure good governance in an organisation. So we clearly, as a management team, agree that some of these areas need to improve, and they need to improve rapidly. It includes these areas, you know, the contractual arrangements. There's a whole, just for instance, there's a whole plan of work in place. Unfortunately, due to COVID and, you know, having to manage the pandemic response and other issues the council's had of a more strategic nature, we are a little bit behind with some of this work, but we are ensuring that the reports come through regularly. The internal auditor attends our executive team to present them. And then I've been very clear, irrespective of management arrangements, if the internal auditor is unhappy with progress, they must raise that through the right governance channels, i.e. to yourselves. So what I'm hoping is that, and, you know, given we're such a wide-ranging business in terms of all of our areas of work, there will be at times areas that don't do as well as we would like to, but we are trying to keep on top of things, and we'll ensure that all of the actions are reviewed regularly. And if there isn't the required progress, it's raised directly with the director and the management team of that area. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen, did I see your hand up? Yeah.
Hi, thank you, Chair. I'm just picking up on a point from Daljeet when you said that you accept that these things have weaknesses and need to improve rapidly. A question that occurred to me was in the accounts payable and procure to pay audit, the overall assurance opinion is significant, and yet we have 4 recommendations in there, 2 of which are quite high profile things. I mean, significant numbers of purchase orders being raised retrospectively. We're not talking about just a small de minimis amount, we're talking about significant numbers. And then we say there is no robust process for the approval of purchase card expenditure. Now, I would have thought that they need to be a little bit more than medium recommendations, and that it's probably, this needs to improve a little bit quicker than, I'm not sure what the actual time frame is that you give for a medium recommendation, Kevin, but I would imagine it would be something like 3 months or something like that. Is there not probably leeway to actually make these more high priority than they appear to be in this report? It just seems to be letting people off the hook a little bit by giving it a significant assurance opinion and giving these medium status.
Jess, I just come back on that. Yeah, I think just to kind of pick up on a few things there, Chair. I would totally reiterate the comments that Daljeet made about the reporting through the exec team, which I think is a really good step forward. I think all of the points which Councillor Swinburne's raised are very valid points. and lead into, I think, some of the question that Stephen's asked as well, around when we have discussed all of these points with the management concerned in terms of finalising the report, we are happy and quite assured that action has already been taken in all of the points, especially the ones that Councillor Swinburne raised. And I think coming back to kind of into Stephen's comment as well, I know that in terms of certainly on the accounts payable and procure to pay audit, there are already a number of additional reports being raised and ran by the management team to identify areas of any non-compliance, which are then escalated quite quickly to try and bring that those occurrences down. To pick up on sort of Stephen's point specifically, I think we've often used the turn of phrase around it's not always an exact science in terms of the assurance level. Obviously, we have put in terms of the wording around the process for the approval of purchase card expenditure. What I would say is that that did not apply to all purchase card expenditure. It was elements of it, it was a proportion of it. Had it been on the entire system of purchase card expenditure, I would probably agree that that would warrant something a little bit stronger than a medium priority recommendation, Chair. But I think given the values concerned in terms of the wider sense of everything that the county council spends and taking it in the round, a medium priority recommendation was appropriate. And it again, similarly with the purchase orders, yes, a significant number of individual orders, but then when we have to extrapolate that out and look at the value of those orders compared with the value of expenditure across the entire authority, a medium priority recommendation was appropriate. You are quite correct in terms of we obviously then monitor that, and if we then go back and audit it again and find that there's been no progress or the situation's worse, that's where we may consider escalating that up to a higher priority recommendation. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about purchase order numbers, of course, I mean, it can be, and I've seen situations like this and small amounts where full authorization has been done to make that payment, and purchase order is literally somebody pressing a button to get a number, and that for clerical error hasn't happened, or just happened just a little bit later than it should. Obviously, though, it can flag up something more serious going on regarding the authorization process, and just to completely cover everyone as well, just to be very strict on making sure that they're raised first. Does anyone else have any comments at all on this? No. So the recommendations. Sorry, Peter. Sorry, Peter.
Chair, sorry. Thank you. I wanted just to comment on the audit on perimeter security, Kevin. And it's a bit of a technical point, but in the issues and recommendations, the report says that there's a limited capacity to identify breaches from security events. And I apologise for being a bit technical, but one of the things about these software systems is that if you can't identify security events, which may just be mistakes, it limits your ability to anticipate more serious security incursions. Mm-hmm. So, do you see what I mean? So if you can't see what's happening when things are just very minor, it in some cases excludes your ability to see where a pattern of events is building up. So, if someone can get some assurance on that, that would be probably helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Nick, did you want to come?
Yeah, just a quick update. I mean, there's a lot of work going on. Just to give Mr. Topping some reassurance that there's been a new sort of security board set up to look at the sort of security of the council's networks, sort of local area networks and wide area networks. There's a lot of work going on in improving things like payment processing systems, which can sometimes be a point of breach with PCI DSS. New sort of getting everything under one system. There's a load of work going on in terms of anti-phishing stuff as well, and looking at where the vulnerabilities are, as well as all of the enhancement of the sort of firewall, trying to get more into the cloud and have less on site. So progress is being made pretty rapidly, and that will continue to be a priority.
Great. Thank you, Nick. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, yes, thank you, Chair. It was just to comment on the system, which Peter's quite correct. It is quite a technical area, not one which I would profess to know a great deal about in any great detail. But I know that the system that was in use at the time of the audit was a temporary solution. And since the audit's been undertaken, there's actually, as Councillor Oliver says, part of the range of actions that have been taken is that a new system's actually being put into place by Information Services, and that the officers are currently in the process of evaluating exactly how that system and the other systems in place match up about the security requirements to identify any shortfalls and put those correct. So just to echo Councillor Oliver's point, I think that action is being taken since the time that the audit was undertaken, but accept your point totally, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else on this? The recommendation for this is that we consider the key findings, which we've done, and there's some very good points raised. So is everyone happy to move on to the next item on that basis? Thank you. Now, urgent business, any business that, in the opinion of the Chair, should, by reason of special circumstances, be considered as a matter of urgency. I've had the request from the Deputy Chief Executive, Kelly Angus, just to give a brief update following the recent meetings regarding the new governance structure and the progress of investigations. Kelly?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. As members of the Audit Committee will be aware, at the last meeting I presented a summary governance framework to members of the committee in relation to providing some assurance as to how the Council was managing an unprecedented set of governance issues. The purpose of the framework was to establish and reassure Audit Committee that there were lines of accountability and also potential future learning from the number and nature of the unprecedented set of governance issues which were taking a significant amount of officer time to review, categorise, and also to ensure that robust governance was being applied to the processes which the organisation was needing to facilitate. I'm really pleased to report that the Council has made good progress in regard to the many matters which it has been dealing with, and that the Director of Corporate Assurance and a team of independent consultants have assisted with. I would just ask members of the Audit Committee to note that the Council is still managing these unprecedented set of extraordinary governance matters, and therefore the issues that the Council is dealing with are predominantly live issues, and they're likely to remain so for some time until the matters come to a conclusion. Due to the confidentiality and the sensitive nature of these matters, it would be inappropriate to expand on these matters further at this time. But in order to reassure members of the Audit Committee regarding the robustness of the assurance arrangements which are in place, I have requested, with the Chair's agreement, an extraordinary Audit Committee to be held in the coming weeks. The purpose of this committee would be to provide more detailed assurance to members of the Audit Committee on the set of unprecedented governance matters which are currently being managed by the Council, and members will receive notification of the date and time of this meeting very shortly. Again, I'd just like to reiterate to Audit Committee members, the details provided will not be about the live issues, but about the processes and assurance which can be provided to ensure that matters are being managed in line with the appropriate policies, procedures, governance and legal advice being provided to the authority at this time. It is anticipated that in the future a learning exercise will be completed to consider the unprecedented set of governance issues that the authority has experienced, the learning which can be obtained from this and how this can be applied in the future. However, the Council can only do this when all matters are concluded, and we are some way from that at this time. Thank you, Chair. I'll leave it at that for now in terms of an update. I think that is probably as much as I can give members at this time. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. So just probably particularly for Peter and Stephen, if they're checking their emails normally just ahead of the audit meetings, the normal ones, just keep an eye out for notification of that extraordinary meeting. So thanks very much, Kelly. The date of the next ordinary meeting is Wednesday, the 27th of January 2021 at 10:15. Now, I'll now ask for permission, if everyone's agreement, to move to part 2. The items discussed are those that excluded under public interest and legal privilege exclusion. We will be looking at a detailed pink paper report on areas regarding risk, which would compromise the organisation if they were disclosed. So is everyone happy that we move to part 2? Yeah, see everyone nodding. Thank you. Can we stop the recording, and could somebody confirm that the recording has been stopped?